This 4-year-old beggar girl cures a millionaire's son, but everyone was shocked to discover the girl's real identity. Comment what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The sun beat down on the town square of Willow Creek that afternoon in December. The brick paving of the walkway reflected the heat, making the air even more stifling. Lily, a small girl of 6, watched the tourists passing. By intently as she played absently with a mint leaf she had picked earlier from Mr. Johnson's backyard. Her large brown eyes, as keen as a sparrow's, scanned every detail of the activity. Her curly hair, slightly disheveled, framed a face that, despite her young age, already carried a seriousness incompatible with her years. She wore a simple blouse, a little larger than her size, and faded shorts that she had received from a lady at the farmer's market. It was then that a desperate cry cut through the afternoon air. "Help! My son can't breathe!" The anguished voice echoed through the square, making Lily jump. A few feet away, a boy of approximately 8 years old was lying on the ground, his hands clutching his chest, struggling to get air. An elegant woman, who Lily would later find out was Magnolia, the housekeeper, flustered around the boy, trying, unsuccessfully, to help him with an inhaler. "Ben, honey, try to breathe slowly," she pleaded, but the panic in her voice only increased the boy's distress. Without thinking twice, Lily ran to her small backpack leaning against a park bench. There she kept her most precious treasures, a handful of herbs that she always carried with her, a precious teaching from her grandmother. "When someone needs it, you'll know what to do," were the words that echoed in her memory. The little girl approached the group that was already forming around the boy with determination. She weaved her way between the adult's legs and knelt beside Ben. Her little eyes met his, wide with fear. "Let me help," she said in a voice so firm that made Magnolia stop for a moment. Without waiting for an answer, Lily was already taking a small bundle of leaves out of her backpack. With the precision of someone who had done this hundreds of times, she grabbed her water bottle and began to prepare an infusion. "Get that street kid away from here!" someone shouted from the crowd. But Magnolia, desperate at Ben's increasingly serious condition, grabbed the person's arm. There was something in that child's eyes that conveyed an inexplicable confidence. In a few minutes, which seemed like an eternity, Lily had prepared a tea with a specific combination of herbs. The strong and pleasant aroma spread through the air. Carefully, she helped Ben take small sips. To the astonishment of everyone present, the boy's breathing began to regulate gradually. Color returned to his face, and the tightness in his chest decreased. Magnolia watched, incredulous, as Lily continued to stay by his side, holding his hand and whispering words of comfort. It was at that moment that a luxurious car parked abruptly near the square. A tall man, approximately 45 years old, got out, in a hurry. Edgar Vanderbilt had been alerted about his son's crisis and had arrived fearing the worst. What he found, however, was a scene he would never forget. His son Ben, who suffered from a rare and severe respiratory disease, was now breathing normally, sitting on the lap of a small, unknown girl who was humming a lullaby softly. "What happened here?" Edgar asked, his deep voice filled with confusion and relief. Before anyone could answer, an elegant woman got out of the same car, her high heels clacking loudly against the paving stones. Theodora, his sister-in-law, analyzed the scene. With suspicion, her eyes narrowed when she saw the scruffy girl so close to her nephew. "Edgar, we can't allow just anyone to get so close to Ben. This is absurd." But Edgar wasn't listening. His gaze was fixed on Lily, who was now getting up shyly, putting her herbs back in her worn backpack. There was something familiar about that child, something he couldn't explain. "What's your name, little one?" he asked, kneeling down to get to her height. "Lily," she replied, her voice almost a whisper, but her eyes maintaining a determined gleam. "Where did you learn to do this, Lily?" The girl hesitated for a moment, her hands clutching the strap of her backpack. "My grandma taught me before she passed," she replied simply, leaving a story in the air that seemed much more complex than those few words suggested. Edgar looked at his son, who was now smiling, something that didn't happen during his asthma attacks. He made a decision that would forever change the fate of everyone present. "Lily, would you like to come see our house?" The invitation hung in the air like a soap bubble, delicate and full of possibilities. Theodora stepped forward, about to protest, but something in Edgar's eyes stopped her. Magnolia watched the scene with a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. Little Lily looked at the sky, as if seeking an answer in the clouds that were beginning to form. Her heart was beating fast, divided between the fear of the unknown and a strange feeling that this moment was destined to happen. What no one knew was that this simple decision would trigger a series of events that would bring to light long-buried secrets, surprising revelations, and a story of love, loss, and redemption that would forever transform the lives of all involved. The Vanderbilt mansion stood imposingly on top of one of Willow Creek's most prestigious hills, its colonial windows silent witnesses to more than 2 centuries of history. Lily, sitting in the back seat of Edgar's car next to Ben, watched in wonder as they drove up the cobblestone street. Her small fingers still tightly gripped her worn backpack, her only link to her previous life. Theodora followed in another car right behind, her perfectly manicured nails drumming impatiently on the steering wheel. Her mind was already devising strategies to deal with this unexpected complication in her plans. As administrator of part of the family's businesses, she had carefully orchestrated every detail to maintain control over the Vanderbilt fortune after the death of her sister Laura 3 years ago. The presence of this street girl threatened all her planning. Upon entering the property, Magnolia quickly took command of the situation, guiding Lily through a side corridor. "Let's get you a bath first, sweetie," she said, her voice wavering between kindness and concern. The housekeeper, who had worked for the family for 15 years, felt torn between gratitude for what the girl had done for Ben and fear of changes to her meticulously organized routine. In the luxurious guest bathroom, Lily faced her own image in the mirror for the first time in months. Her brown eyes, inherited from her mother Clarice, seemed even deeper against the golden background of the wall. While Magnolia prepared the bath, the girl discreetly transferred a small bundle from her backpack into her blouse. They were seeds of medicinal herbs that her grandmother had entrusted to her, her most precious treasure. "Can you tell me about your family, dear?" Magnolia asked as she helped Lily with the bath. The girl was silent for a few moments, her little hands playing with the soap foam. "My mum left to do some important research," she began, her voice soft but firm. "Grandma said she was looking for special plants in the woods, but then no one heard from her again." Silent tears began to run down Lily's face, mixing with the bathwater. "Grandma took care of me, taught me everything about the healing plants. But 6 months ago she passed too. She fell asleep and didn't wake up." Magnolia felt her heart clench. There was something in the way the girl spoke, a maturity beyond her years that made her story even more poignant. "And since then, you've been living alone. Mr. Johnson at the farmer's market sometimes lets me sleep in his storage room. He also teaches me about the herbs he sells," Lily replied, as Magnolia helped her dress in clean clothes she had set aside from Ben's old wardrobe. In the main office of the mansion, Edgar was conducting a tense conversation with Theodora. "Have you lost your mind, Edgar? Bringing a street girl into this house? What if she's part of some scam?" "You saw what she did today, Theodora. None of the expensive medications we've been buying worked as well as her treatment," Edgar replied, his voice carrying a mixture of hope and defiance. "Besides, Something about her reminds me of Laura. Maybe it's the way she looks. I can't explain it. Don't you dare compare that girl to my sister. Theodora exploded, her eyes flashing with anger. Laura was unique, special. That girl probably learned some tricks from healers to scam desperate people like you. Before Edgar could respond, they were interrupted by a knock on the door. It was Oliver, his best friend and business partner, who had been called urgently. "Edgar, I came as soon as I received your message. How's Ben?" "Better than ever. Thanks to a little savior," Edgar replied, recounting the afternoon's events. Oliver listened attentively, his expression changing from concern to intense curiosity. "A child who knows traditional medicine to this extent? That's extraordinary," Oliver commented, adjusting his glasses thoughtfully. "You said she mentioned a grandmother who taught her? It would be interesting to find out more about this family." In Ben's room, a touching scene was unfolding. The boy, already recovered from the scare, enthusiastically showed Lily his collection of books. "This one talks about all the plants in the United States," he exclaimed, pointing to a thick illustrated volume. "Can you read?" Lily nodded shyly. "My mum taught me before she left. She said that knowledge is like a seed. It needs to be planted and cared for every day." Her words carried a wisdom that made Ben look at her with even more admiration. During dinner, served in the imposing dining room, Lily watched the silver cutlery and fine china with fascination. Theodora, sitting across from her, didn't take her eyes off the girl like a hawk watching its prey. It was then that Ben had a small coughing fit. Without hesitating, Lily jumped from her chair and ran to her backpack, which she had insisted on keeping nearby. In seconds, she was back with some fresh leaves. "Chew slowly," she instructed, handing the herbs to Ben. "It's horehound with mint. It helps you breathe better." Edgar watched the scene with a mixture of admiration and growing curiosity. "Where exactly did your mother do her research, Lily?" The girl lowered her eyes to her still full plate. "In the woods near Salita Cave," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "She said that there were plants there that no one else knew about, plants that could cure diseases that doctors couldn't." That information made Edgar and Oliver exchange meaningful glances. Salita Cave was known not only for its natural beauty, but also for being a place of interest for researchers in various fields. Later, after Lily was settled in one of the guest rooms, Edgar met again with Oliver in his office. "I need you to research missing researchers in the area in recent years," he asked, pouring 2 glasses of whiskey. "Something tells me that this girl's story is much more complex than it seems." "I'll start immediately," Oliver replied, already taking notes on his phone. "But Edgar, be careful. Theodora is clearly not happy with the girl's presence, and you know how your sister-in-law can be persuasive when opposed." In the room, lying on a bed softer than any she had ever known, Lily took the small bundle of seeds she had hidden from inside the pillowcase. They were the last ones her mother had collected before disappearing. "I promise I'll make them grow, Mom," she whispered into the darkness, a single tear running down her face. What no one knew was that same night, in an office in downtown Willow Creek, Theodora was making a call that would change the course of events. "I need you to investigate every detail about a girl named Lily," she said to the person on the other end of the line. "No matter the cost, I want to know everything about her and her family, and especially I want to know what secrets she may be hiding." Lily's first week at the Vanderbilt mansion brought subtle but significant changes to all the residents. In her room, the girl had created a small makeshift garden on the balcony, using old pots that Magnolia, increasingly enchanted with the little one, had gotten for her. The precious seeds she had brought with her were planted with care, each accompanied by a prayer that her grandmother had taught her. Ben, who previously spent most of his time isolated in his room due to his condition, now accompanied Lily in her daily plant care activities. His breathing had improved considerably since he started taking the infusions prepared by his new friend. "How do you know which plant to use?" he asked constantly, fascinated by the girl's knowledge. "It's like they talk to me," Lily replied, her small fingers caressing the leaves delicately. Each plant has its own story to tell, just like people. She had developed a meticulous routine. She would wake up before sunrise to harvest the herbs at the exact point of energy, as her grandmother had taught her, and prepare different mixtures for each moment of Ben's day. Magnolia watched this transformation with a mixture of joy and concern. The boy, who before could barely climb the stairs without having an attack, was now running through the garden, chasing butterflies with Lily. However, the housekeeper couldn't help but notice the increasingly dark looks that Theodora cast at the girl during her daily visits to the mansion. One particularly hot morning, while the children were playing in the garden, Edgar found Oliver in his office, holding a thick folder of documents. "I found something," said his friend, adjusting his glasses nervously. "And it's not a pretty story. Lista de adaptações feitas. Nesta parte, Diamantina, Willow Creek, cidade fictícia americana. Pedras portuguesas do calçamento, brick paving of the walkway, tipo de calçamento comum nos Inquins Inua. Seu Juvenal, Mr. Johnson, nome americano comum. Hortelã, mint, planta similar e popular nos Iwa. Benício, Ben, diminutivo americano, comum. Magnólia, nome americano comum. Vasconcelos, Vanderbilt, sobrenome americano de famílias ricas. Teodora, nome americano comum. Gruta do Salitre, Salitre Cave, nome adaptado para manter o significado. Guaco, Whorehound, erva com propriedades similares. Administradora de parte dos negócios da família, Administrator of part of the family's businesses, mantido o sentido, adaptado para o inglês. Mercado municipal, Farmers Market, local comum nos Iboaluá para compra de produtos frescos. Não ouse comparar essa menina com minha irmã. Don't you dare compare that girl to my sister. Mantido o sentido, adaptado para o inglês. Otávio, Oliver, nome americano comum. Texto, adaptado. Simple. Edgar closed the office door and sat down, preparing himself for what was to come. Oliver spread several newspaper clippings and documents on the mahogany desk. Clarice Medeiros, 32 years old, a renowned researcher in ethnobotany and traditional Brazilian medicine, disappeared during an expedition in the woods near Salitre Cave exactly 2 years ago. She was known for her revolutionary work with rare medicinal plants. Lily's mother, Edgar murmured, his suspicions finally confirmed. "Yes, but there's more," Oliver continued, pulling out another document. Clarice was developing research on a specific species of plant found only in that region, which, according to local residents, had extraordinary properties for the treatment of respiratory diseases. Edgar felt his heart race. Respiratory diseases? Like Ben's? Exactly. And here's the most intriguing part. 2 weeks before her disappearance, Clarice filed a preliminary patent on a possible revolutionary treatment. The next day, she received a $1 million offer from Sterling Pharmaceuticals, but she refused. Adam Sterling, Edgar pronounced the name, as if it were poison. My biggest competitor in the pharmaceutical market. Distant thunder made the office windows shake, announcing an approaching storm. In the garden, Lily suddenly stopped playing with Ben, her eyes fixed on the dark clouds that were forming. Something in that heavy sky awakened memories that she was desperately trying to repress. That same afternoon, while the rain fell relentlessly over Willow Creek, Theodora met in a discreet cafe in the city center with Victor, the private investigator she had hired. "What did you find?" she asked, her voice low but authoritative. "The girl is indeed the daughter of Clarice Medeiros," he replied, passing a manila envelope under the table. "But there's something strange about this whole story. In the last records before disappearing, Clarice repeatedly mentioned a threat in her field diary. Someone was following her, trying to steal her research." Theodora flipped through the documents with growing interest. "Continue." "The most interesting part is that I found records of significant bank transfers from Sterling Pharmaceuticals to an account in the Cayman Islands, dated the day before Clarice's disappearance." A calculating smile formed on Theodora's lips. "Interesting, very interesting." At the mansion, the storm had intensified. Lily, trembling in her bed, hugged tightly a small notebook where she had begun to draw the plants she cultivated. The thunder brought confusing flashbacks. A dark cave, altered voices, her mother shouting for her to run. Without realizing it, she began to cry. It was then that the door opened gently, and Ben entered, carrying his favorite flashlight. "I can't sleep with thunder either," he said, sitting next to her. "Can we be scared together?" That simple gesture of friendship made Lily smile through her tears. Soon the two children were building a fort with blankets where they shared stories and fears. Ben showed his favorite books while Lily drew the plants that her mother had taught her to recognize. In his room, Edgar couldn't sleep. The documents that Oliver had brought revealed a much bigger plot than he imagined. His phone rang, showing a message from an old contact from the police department. "We found something on the security cameras near Saliter Cave from the day of the disappearance. You need to see this." The next morning during breakfast, Magnolia noticed something different about Lily. The girl, usually so talkative about her plants, was strangely quiet, her eyes fixed on a distant point. It was then that Ben had a coughing fit stronger than usual. Lily immediately ran to her room and returned with a different infusion than she usually prepared. "This one is special," she said, her small hands trembling slightly as she held the cup. "Mom only showed me this plant once. She said it was the most powerful of all, but we needed to keep it a secret." Edgar, who was observing the scene, noticed something familiar in the aroma coming from the cup. It was the same smell he had felt years ago when Laura, his late wife, had mentioned a researcher who was developing a revolutionary treatment for Ben's illness. Meanwhile, in his office in the city center, Theodora received an important call. "Ms. Vanderbilt," said the voice on the other end of the line. "This is Dr. Adam Sterling. I heard you have information about Clarice Medeiros' daughter, I believe. We have a lot to talk about." The rain continued to fall over Willow Creek, washing the cobblestone streets and carrying with it secrets that very soon would come to light. In the garden of the mansion, Lily's plants grew strong, guarding in their leaves stories that only she could understand. And somewhere, hidden in the shadows of the historic town, someone was watching carefully every move of the little girl. And who knew too much? The Vanderbilt mansion was preparing for an important event that night. Edgar had organized a charity dinner that would bring together big names from Willow Creek society, including renowned doctors and researchers. Among the guests was Dr. Evan Quinn, one of the leading experts in ethnobotany in the country. Lily watched from her bedroom window the preparations in the garden, where employees set up tables under the old trees. Her small hands nervously clutched the drawing notebook that had become her confidant. In recent weeks, she'd been recording not only the plants she cultivated, but also fragments of memories that surfaced in her dreams. A dark cave, strange symbols on the walls, her mother whispering urgent instructions. "Are you coming down for dinner?" asked Ben, entering the room without knocking, as had become his custom. In recent weeks, the boy had completely transformed. His previously pale skin now had color, and his shortness of breath had become increasingly rare, thanks to Lily's treatments. "Magnolia said I need to go," she replied, adjusting the new dress that the housekeeper had insisted on buying especially for the occasion. "But I don't like it when there are so many people like that. It seems like everyone is staring at me." Downstairs, Edgar was talking in his office with Oliver, who brought new discoveries about his investigations. "The bank transfers to the account in the Cayman Islands have been traced," he explained, spreading documents on the table. "The money originally came from Sterling Pharmaceuticals, but it went through a shell corporation first. And guess who's the administrator of that company?" Edgar felt his stomach sink. "Theodora?" "Exactly. Your sister-in-law has been involved with Adam Sterling for longer than we imagined. And there's more. I found records that Laura, your wife, was in contact with Clarice Medeiros in the months before her death." The revelation hit Edgar like a lightning bolt. Laura had spent her last months desperately seeking a cure for Ben's illness. Could it be that she had discovered something about Clarice's research? Night began to fall over Willow Creek, and the first guests began to arrive. Theodora, dressed in an elegant red suit, circulated among the groups with her calculating smile, occasionally casting furtive glances at Victor, who mingled with the buffet staff, following her instructions to observe every move of Lily. The little girl came down the stairs timidly, holding Ben's hand. Her light blue dress, chosen by Magnolia, contrasted with her dark curls carefully arranged. Some guests whispered among themselves, curious about the mysterious girl that Edgar had taken in. It was during dinner that the first crucial moment of the night happened. Ben, sitting among the guests, began to show signs of a respiratory attack. Before anyone could react, Lily was already by his side, taking from her pocket a small vial with an infusion. "Drink slowly," she instructed, her voice calm but firm. "Breathe with me like we practiced." Dr. Evan Quinn, who was sitting nearby, watched the scene with growing interest. His perceptive eyes noted the specific technique that Lily used to administer the medicine, the way she combined the infusion with breathing exercises. "This is extraordinary," he commented, approaching after Ben calmed down. "This technique is very specific. I've only seen something like this once, in revolutionary work on traditional Brazilian medicine." The hall went silent. Theodora, who was talking to some businessmen, discreetly approached to listen. "Where did you learn this, little one?" asked Dr. Quinn, his kind eyes fixed on Lily. The girl hesitated, looking instinctively at Edgar, who nodded encouragingly. "My mom taught me," she replied quietly. "She said they were secrets of the plants, passed down from mother to daughter, for many generations." "Your mother?" Dr. Quinn paused, his eyes widening in recognition. "You're Clarice Medeiros' daughter, aren't you? That unique combination of herbs, the preparation method. It's exactly how she described it in her last research." The revelation caused a buzz among the guests. Theodora paled visibly, her hands squeezing tightly the glass of wine she held. "You knew my mother?" Lily asked, her voice trembling with emotion. "I did, little one. Clarice was a brilliant scientist. She was about to revolutionize the treatment of respiratory diseases. With her research on a rare species of plant found only in the Salita Cave region, her disappearance was an irreparable loss to science." Edgar exchanged meaningful glances with Oliver. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit together. But before they could explore the subject further, a sharp scream cut through the air. On the balcony, where Lily cultivated her small garden, a small fire had started mysteriously, threatening to destroy her precious plants. The girl ran desperately, followed by Ben and other guests. Among the flames, she managed to identify her most important pots, those that contained the rare seeds left by her mother. "I can't lose those plants," she shouted, trying to approach the flames. Edgar held her firmly, while employees ran with fire extinguishers. In the middle of the confusion, No one noticed Victor discreetly walking away, putting a lighter in his pocket. Theodora watched the scene with an almost imperceptible smile, satisfied with the chaos she had orchestrated. After the fire was controlled, Lily cried inconsolably in Magnolia's arms. Most of her plants had been destroyed, but by some miracle, the pots with the special seeds had survived, protected by their more remote location. Later that night, when most of the guests had already left, Dr. Quinn requested a private conversation with Edgar. "There's something you need to know," he said, his expression grave. "The last time I spoke with Clarice, she mentioned that she was being followed. She was afraid that someone was trying to steal her research, and she left me an envelope to be opened only in case of her disappearance." Edgar felt his heart race. "And what was in that envelope?" "Coordinates," replied the doctor. "Specific. Coordinates inside Salita Cave, along with a warning, if something happens to me, only my daughter will know how to find the way." Upstairs, Lily had finally fallen asleep, exhausted by the events of the night. In her dreams, confusing images mixed, her mother drawing strange symbols on the walls of a cave, whispering about a hidden treasure that needed to be protected at all costs. What no one knew was that same night, Adam Sterling received a detailed report from Theodora about the events of the dinner. "The girl knows more than we imagined," said the message. "We need to act fast." In his room, Ben rummaged through an old box of his mother's. Something in the events of the night had sparked a memory. Among old papers, he found a yellowed envelope with an unfinished letter. "Dear Edgar, if you are reading this, it means I couldn't wait for Clarice's return. There is something you need to know about her research and our son." The days that followed the charity dinner were marked by a palpable tension in the Vanderbilt mansion. Edgar spent hours locked in his office with Oliver, analyzing Laura's unfinished letter that Ben had found. His deceased wife's words echoed in his mind, revealing a plot much more complex than he could imagine. "Dear Edgar, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't wait for Clarice's return. There is something you need to know about her research and our son. Ben's illness is not just a rare condition, like the doctors say. I discovered through Clarice that there is a link to ancestral plants in this region. She was close to a revolutionary discovery, something that could not only help our son, but many other children. However, powerful people are trying to prevent this research from coming to light." The letter ended abruptly, as if Laura had been interrupted. On the edge of the paper, there was a series of numbers and symbols that seemed to form some kind of code. Meanwhile, in the partially burned garden, Lily worked tirelessly to recover what remained of her plants. Her small hands, dirty with soil, moved with determination among the scorched pots. Ben helped her, carrying water and new soil, his breathing noticeably stronger and more stable. "Look, Lily," he exclaimed suddenly, pointing to one of the pots that had survived the fire. A small green sprout, different from any other they had ever seen, emerged from the dark earth. Lily's eyes widened in recognition. "It's her," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "The special plant that Mom made me promise to keep. She said it was the most important of all." Magnolia, who was watching the children from the balcony, noticed something strange in Theodora's behavior, who was arriving for her daily visit. Edgar's sister-in-law seemed particularly interested in the garden, her eyes fixed on the pot that Lily and Ben were examining so carefully. In the city center, at a discreet cafe, Victor met with a distinguished-looking man with a penetrating gaze, Adam Sterling. "The girl managed to save some plants from the fire," reported the investigator, "and from what I could observe, one of them seems to be especially important." Sterling drummed his fingers on the table, his face a mask of false concern. "Theodora assured me that the fire would destroy all the evidence. We need a new plan." He slid a thick envelope across the table. "I want you to find out exactly what that child knows about her mother's research." At the mansion, Edgar received a visit from Dr. Evan, who brought with him an old, dusty folder. "I found it in my files," he explained, carefully opening the war document. "These are the last notes Clarice shared with me before she disappeared. She was studying a species of plant that the Native Americans in the region have used for centuries to treat respiratory diseases. But the most interesting thing is this." He pointed to a detailed drawing of a flower, accompanied by complex scientific annotations. Edgar felt his heart race as he recognized the pattern. It was identical to one of the drawings that Lily obsessively made in her notebook. In Lily's room, the girl leafed through her drawing notebook when a loose sheet fell to the floor. It was a drawing different from the others, made at a moment when she was half asleep after one of her nightmare episodes. The drawing showed a series of symbols on the walls of a cave, the same symbols that appeared on the edge of Laura's unfinished letter. Ben, who was with her, picked up the drawing with curiosity. "It looks like those cave paintings we saw in the history book," he commented. "Where did you see this, Lily?" The girl closed her eyes, trying to organize the confusing memories that surfaced. "It was in the cave. The last time I saw my mum. She was drawing these symbols on the walls and saying it was a map, that only those who knew the ancient plants would know how to read it." At that moment, distant thunder made the windows tremble. A new storm was approaching Willow Creek, bringing with it more than just rain. Lily felt a shiver run down her spine. The storms always brought back the most difficult memories. "Ben," she called, her voice serious, "I need to tell you something about the day my mom disappeared." The boy sat next to her on the bed, holding her hand tightly. Outside, the first raindrops began to fall. "It was a stormy day like today," Lily began, her voice almost a whisper. "Mom had taken me to Salita Cave. She was very agitated, saying that she needed to hide something important. She had a big notebook with her, full of notes about the special plants that healed people like you." While Lily spoke, downstairs, Edgar and Dr. Evan made a shocking discovery in Clarice's notes. "My God," murmured the scientist, "she wasn't just studying the plants. She had discovered how to reproduce them in the laboratory, how to enhance their effects. It was a revolutionary discovery. And someone was willing to do anything to prevent that discovery from coming to light." Edgar completed, remembering the words of Laura's letter. In Theodora's office, she received an urgent call from Sterling. "We need to act now," he said, his voice tense. "That brat knows where Clarice hid the original notes, and if Edgar finds out the truth about what happened to the scientist—" "Leave it to me," Theodora interrupted, a plan already forming in her mind. "I have documents proving that I'm a distant relative of the girl. I'm going to file for emergency guardianship tomorrow." The storm was now falling with all its force over Willow Creek. In the room, Lily continued her story to Ben, each word bringing to the surface long repressed memories. "There were other people in the cave that day," she said, trembling. "Men I'd never seen before. Mom hid me behind a rock and told me not to make a noise no matter what happened. She stored something inside the wall of the cave, behind some plants that only she knew, and then... Her words were interrupted by a flash of lightning that illuminated the entire room. In the garden, the small sprout in the surviving pot trembled in the strong wind, its leaves revealing a unique pattern that only Clarice Medeiros had documented in her research. What no one knew was that that same night, someone else was arriving in Willow Creek, a mysterious figure who had spent the last 2 years hidden, recovering from injuries and gathering evidence. Someone who knew all the secrets of the ancestral plants and who had promised to return when it was safe. At the mansion, Edgar held in his hands 2 crucial pieces of the puzzle: Laura's unfinished letter and Clarice's notes. Somewhere between those words was the key to unlocking not only the mystery of the scientist's disappearance, but also the cure that could save his son. The news arrived like a thunderbolt on a seemingly quiet morning. Theodora had obtained a temporary guardianship order for Lily. The document, presented by her private lawyer, contained alleged evidence of a distant kinship with the girl's family, as well as arguments about the inadequacy of her stay at the Vanderbilt mansion. Edgar received the notification in his office, his hands trembling as he read the terms of the document. Oliver, who was present at the time, immediately began making calls to his legal contacts. "This doesn't make sense," he murmured nervously, adjusting his glasses. "How did she manage to prove kinship so quickly?" In the garden, oblivious to the turmoil that was forming, Lily cared for the mysterious plant that had survived the fire. Her small fingers delicately caressed the leaves that grew with a unique pattern, exactly as her mother had described in their last days together. Ben was by her side, as always, holding a water sprayer and watching the plant's growth with fascination. "You know, Lily," he said, his breathing noticeably stronger in recent weeks, "since you arrived, it's like I can feel the air entering my lungs properly for the first time. It's like the plants know exactly what I need." The girl smiled, but her eyes carried a worry beyond her age. The night before, after telling Ben about her memories of the cave, she had had another one of her vivid dreams. This time, however, something was different. Instead of the usual scary scenes, she had dreamed of her mother drawing a map on the walls of the cave, using plant juices to make markings that would only be visible under certain conditions. Magnolia watched the children from the balcony, her heart aching. The housekeeper had just heard about the injunction through the whispers of the other employees. In her 15 years of service to the Vanderbilt family, she had never seen such a positive transformation as the one Lily had brought to that house, especially to Ben. The idea of separating the children seemed not only unfair, but cruel. In the city center, in his luxurious office, Theodora met with Adam Sterling. The businessman leafed through the falsified documents they had managed to produce to prove the alleged kinship with satisfaction. "Impressive how money can create family. Ties out of nothing," he commented with a cynical smile. "Now we just need to make sure the girl leads us to her mother's original notes." "Everything is already prepared," Theodora replied, pouring herself a glass of wine. "I have a secluded house near Salater Cave. I'm going to take her there as soon as the injunction is served. Far from Edgar and that sick kid, she'll be more cooperative." What they didn't know was that, at that exact moment, a mysterious figure was watching the building from across the street. The woman, wearing sunglasses and a discreet hat, made notes in a notebook very similar to the one Clarice Medeiros used to use in her research. At the mansion, Edgar received a visit from Dr. Evan, who brought urgent news. "I managed to decipher part of the symbols in Clarice's notes," he explained, spreading papers on the office desk. "They're not just random markings, it's a complex cataloging system she developed, combining indigenous knowledge with scientific methodology." "And what does that mean in practice?" Edgar asked, anxious. "It means that each symbol represents not only a plant but an entire specific preparation process. It's a code that could only be truly understood by someone who grew up learning that knowledge." The scientist paused meaningfully. "Someone like Lily." Upstairs, the girl had started acting strangely, as if she sensed that something was about to happen. She carefully collected some leaves from the special plant, storing them in small envelopes that she hid in different places in the room. Ben helped her, without completely understanding, but trusting his friend's instinct. "We need to store them in safe places," she explained, her voice low and urgent. "Mum always said that knowledge is like a seed. It has to be spread, so it doesn't get lost." It was then that Magnolia entered the room, tears barely contained in her eyes. "Lily, dear, there are some people here who need to talk to you." In the front hall, bailiffs waited next to Theodora, who sported a triumphant smile. "Come, dear," she said, reaching out to Lily. "As your closest relative, I'm going to take care of you now." The chaos that followed would be forever etched in the memory of all those present. Ben began to scream, clinging to his friend. Edgar tried to argue with the officers, presenting documents and asking for time. Magnolia cried openly, holding the boy's shoulders as he now began to have difficulty breathing due to the agitation. Lily, however, maintained a surprising calm. Her eyes scanned the hall, lingering for a moment on each person, as if engraving their faces. Then, to everyone's surprise, she gently released herself from Ben and ran up the stairs. "She's trying to escape!" Theodora exclaimed, but before anyone could react, the girl was already back carrying a small bundle. "Take this, Ben," she said, handing her friend a small fabric bag. "They're the special leaves. 3 times a day, like I taught you. Don't forget, okay?" As she was led to Theodora's car, Lily looked one last time at the mansion garden. The special plant, now with strong and healthy shoots, swayed gently in the breeze. Only she knew that hidden among its roots was a small vial containing seeds. The same ones that her mother had entrusted to her before disappearing. In the office, Edgar and Oliver were already working frantically to reverse the situation. Dr. Evan had joined them, bringing his experience and reputation to question the validity of the documents presented by Theodora. "There's something you need to see," said the scientist, opening his laptop. "I've been searching the university archives and found this." On the screen, an old photo showed Clarice Medeiros next to Laura, Edgar's deceased wife. The two smiled, holding a scientific article on natural treatments for rare respiratory diseases. "They didn't just know each other," Dr. Evan continued. "They worked together. And from what I could find out, Laura was helping Clarice protect her research from people who wanted to steal it." At that moment, Ben ran into the office, his face stained with tears, but his eyes shining with the discovery. "Dad, I found this in Lily's room." In his hands, a detailed drawing showed the entrance to Salata Cave, with specific markings that corresponded exactly to the symbols found in Clarice's notes. Outside the mansion, the mysterious figure who was watching everything from afar made a final note in her notebook before walking away. On the paper, a single sentence: "The time has come to return." At the secluded house where Theodora was taking Lily, a room was already prepared, not with toys or comforts, but with maps of the region and photos of Salata Cave. The plan was to use as much time as necessary to make the girl reveal everything she knew about her mother's research. What no one imagined was that Lily, in her apparent docility, carried with her not only the knowledge of the healing plants, but also an inner strength that she had inherited from her mother, a strength that would be crucial in the days that were to come. The house where Theodora took Lily was in an isolated area, surrounded by dense vegetation, typical of the region. It was an old building, with high windows and thick walls that muffled any sound. In the room designated for the girl, maps and photographs of Salata Cave decorated the walls. A prison disguised as a study area, Lily sat on the narrow bed, her eyes scanning every detail of the environment. Her small hands squeezed the backpack she had insisted on bringing, where she kept her drawing notebook and some carefully preserved dried leaves. Through the window, she could see the distant outline of the mountains where the cave was located, the last place she had seen her mother. At the Vanderbilt mansion, chaos had broken out. Ben had developed a severe respiratory attack, the first in weeks since Lily had started her treatments. Not even the special leaves she had left seemed to have a full effect without her precise preparation instructions. "We need to do something," the boy exclaimed between fits of coughing, his hands squeezing the small bag of herbs that his friend had left. "Lily would never abandon her plants. Something's wrong." Edgar, devastated by his son's situation, met with Oliver and Dr. Evan in the office. On the table, dozens of scattered documents revealed an increasingly complex plot. The scientist had brought new discoveries about the joint research of Laura and Clarice. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a partially published scientific article. Laura was helping Clarice document the chemical properties of the plants. They discovered that certain species, when combined in a specific way, produced a compound capable of reversing completely serious respiratory conditions. "But why did my wife never tell me about this?" Edgar questioned, his voice filled with emotion. "Because they discovered something even bigger," Dr. Evan continued, picking up another document. "The plants that Clarice studied were not just medicinal. They were species considered extinct for centuries, preserved only by the traditional knowledge of some families in the region. The commercial value of this discovery was incalculable." At that moment, Magnolia rushed into the office, carrying an old box she had found in Laura's room. "Mr. Vanderbilt, you need to see this," she said, her hands trembling as she handed him a journal. Laura's journal revealed anguished entries from the last months of her life. "Clarice is right. Someone is following her. Today we found strange markings near the cave, signs that other people have been looking for the plants. We need to protect the research, not just for Ben, but for all the children who suffer like him." At the isolated house, Theodora conducted her own type of investigation. "Lily, dear," she began, her voice falsely sweet, "how about telling me about the special plants your mother studied? I'm sure you want to help other children like Ben." But Lily remained silent, her eyes fixed on the maps on the wall. In her mind, she recalled the words of her mother on the last night she had seen her. "Some people will try to make you talk, my love. But remember, the plants only reveal their secrets to those who respect them. Trust your heart to know who to trust." Outside the house, hidden among the trees, the mysterious figure watched. Her movements were calculated, almost feline, as she made notes in a notebook identical to the one Clarice used to use. The woman adjusted the hat that partially hid her face, marked by a faint scar, a reminder of her last visit to Saliter Cave. At the mansion, Ben had taken refuge in Lily's small garden, where the special plant continued to grow, apparently stronger each day. It was then that he noticed something strange. Among the leaves, small symbols had been engraved in the soil, almost imperceptible. "Dad!" he shouted, his voice firmer despite his still difficult breathing. "I think Lily left a message." Edgar, Oliver, and Dr. Evan ran to the garden. The symbols, when compared with Clarice's notes, formed a kind of map, not of the physical location of the cave, but of the path to find the rare plants inside it. "It's a code within another code," Dr. Evan murmured, marveling. "Clarice taught her daughter to communicate through the plants themselves. It's brilliant." Meanwhile, at the isolated house, Lily began her own form of resistance. During the night, when everyone was asleep, she cultivated small makeshift gardens in every corner she could find, under the bed, behind the curtains, on the windowsills. Each plant was like a word in a secret message that only she knew how to decipher. Theodora, frustrated with the girl's silence, made frequent calls to Adam Sterling. "She's smarter than we thought," she admitted, annoyed. "She doesn't say a word about her mother's research, but spends all day planting herbs everywhere." "Keep pressing," Sterling ordered. "Our investors are getting impatient. If we don't get the complete formula soon, the whole project is at risk." What they didn't realize was that each plant that Lily cultivated had a specific purpose. Some were for strengthening, others for healing, and there were those special ones, the ones her mother had taught her to use to send messages through the wind. At the mansion, Ben was the first to notice. A different, familiar aroma began to linger. "In the air at night, it's the smell of Lily's plants," he exclaimed, his breathing improving instantly as he recognized the fragrance. Dr. Evan confirmed the discovery. Some of these species have the ability to release compounds that can travel miles through the air. The Native American tribes used them for communication between distant villages. Edgar felt his heart race with the realization Lily was not just resisting, she was actively trying to communicate with them. But time was running out. Ben's health gradually worsened without the full treatments, and the documents found suggested that there were more people interested in Clarice's discoveries. At the isolated house, Lily watched the moon through the high window of her room. Her small hands caressed a newly born sprout that grew on the windowsill, a special plant that her mother called the messenger of the night. In her drawing notebook, a new map began to take shape, not with lines and conventional symbols, but with patterns of leaves and flowers that told a story that only the true guardians of the ancient plants could understand. And in the darkness of the night, the mysterious figure who watched everything made her own discovery. Among the plants that Lily cultivated, she recognized a specific pattern, the same one she had taught her little daughter on the last night they were together in Saliter Cave, before circumstances forced them to a separation that should never have happened. The dawn in Willow Creek brought with it an alarming discovery. Ben, after another difficult night, woke up with a breathing so compromised that Edgar was forced to rush him to the hospital. In the boy's room, the last leaves of Lily's special preparation had already been used, and attempts to replicate the treatment without her precise instructions did not have the same effect. While the doctors examined Ben, Magnolia found something intriguing hidden among the boy's bedsheets, a drawing made by Lily that had gone unnoticed. It wasn't a simple childish scribble, but a detailed map of the mansion garden, with specific markings indicating where each type of plant should be cultivated. "Dr. Evan needs to see this," murmured the housekeeper, carefully putting the paper in her apron. In recent days, she had become a key ally in the investigation, her years of living with the family allowing her to notice details that others might ignore. At the isolated house where Theodora kept Lily, the situation became increasingly tense. The girl had transformed every available space into a small green sanctuary, her plants growing in patterns that seemed random to untrained eyes, but followed an ancestral logic learned from her mother. "This is getting ridiculous," Theodora exclaimed, observing how even the cracks between the floorboards now housed small sprouts. "You're going to tell me right now where your mother hid the research notes?" Lily remained silent, her large brown eyes fixed on the plants she cultivated. In her mind, she repeated the mantra that her mother had taught her. "The plants are our messengers, daughter. They know how to find the way even on the darkest nights." At the hospital, Edgar received an urgent call from Oliver. "You need to see this," said his friend, his voice filled with important discoveries. "I managed to access the financial records of Sterling Pharmaceuticals from the last 3 years. There are a series of suspicious transfers to offshore accounts, all coinciding with important dates in Clarice's research." "What do you mean?" Edgar questioned, his gaze alternating between the phone and the door of the room where Ben was being treated. The biggest transfer was made exactly 1 day before Clarice's disappearance, and guess what? The money went through a shell corporation managed by Theodora. The revelation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Evan at the hospital, carrying an old folder and the drawing that Magnolia had found. The scientist was visibly agitated. "Edgar, this is extraordinary!" he exclaimed, spreading the documents on a table in the waiting room. "The map that Lily left is not just a guide to the garden. It's an exact replica of the cultivation system that Clarice documented in her last research. The girl is recreating her mother's work, plant by plant." Meanwhile, at the isolated house, Lily executed her own silent plan. During her sleepless nights, she had discovered that the room where she was confined had an architectural peculiarity, an old ventilation opening, now closed, which connected directly with the outside. Through this small opening, she could send the aroma of her messenger plants into the night. The mysterious figure who watched the house captured the message. Hidden among the trees, the woman with the scar on her face recognized the specific combination of aromas. It was a code that only 2 people in the world knew. Her hands trembled as she made a note in her notebook. "She remembers. My little guardian remembers everything." At the hospital, Ben's condition stabilized, but the doctors were perplexed. The exams show a significant improvement in lung function. In recent weeks, the specialist explained to Edgar, it's as if something had started a regeneration process that we've never seen before. But now, this process seems to be slowing down. Edgar knew exactly why. Without Lily's treatments, the benefits began to diminish. It was then that Magnolia, who had stayed at the mansion, called with a surprising discovery. "Mr. Vanderbilt, the plants in the garden, they're different. Some changed position during the night, as if they had been replanted, but no one entered the garden. And there's more. I found this among them." The housekeeper sent a photo by cell phone. It was a small identification tag, yellowed by time, with the logo of the university where Laura and Clarice had worked together. Dr. Evan examined the photo carefully. "This tag is from our old cataloging system. Only people who worked in the laboratory at that time would know how to use that code." At the isolated house, Theodora received an unexpected visit from Adam Sterling. The businessman was visibly angry with the lack of progress. "We can't wait any longer," he declared, watching suspiciously the various plant arrangements that Lily had created. "The investors are pressing. If we don't get the complete formula soon, the whole project is at risk." What they didn't realize was that each plant in Lily's room had been strategically positioned, forming a pattern that, viewed from above, reproduced exactly the map of Salata Cave that her mother had drawn on the walls of the cave. At the mansion, Ben, who had been discharged on the condition of maintaining rest, made a crucial discovery while examining Lily's garden. Among the plants, he found small markers made of twigs and leaves, arranged in a way that resembled the old games they played together. "Dad!" he called, his voice stronger than in recent days. "I think I know what Lily is trying to tell us." The boy had realized that the plant arrangements formed a sequence, like a story told through leaves and flowers. Each species had been planted in a specific order that, when deciphered with the knowledge that Lily had shared with him, revealed a clear message: the path to Salata Cave and the secrets it held. The mysterious figure, watching everything from a distance, made her last note of the night. "It's time. The circle needs to close." On her face, marked by the scar, a smile of pride formed. Her daughter had become exactly what she always knew she would be: a true guardian of the ancestral knowledge. Night fell over Willow Creek, bringing with it the promise of revelations that would forever change the fate of all involved. In the room of the isolated house, Lily fell asleep among her messenger plants, her small hand squeezing a newly born sprout of the rarest species of all, the one that her mother had said was the key to all the secrets. Ben's discovery about the plant code unleashed a series of events that no one could have predicted. In the library of the mansion, Edgar, Oliver, and Dr. Evan worked tirelessly to decipher the complete message that Lily had left in her living garden. The boy, still recovering, but with a new energy fueled by the hope of helping his friend, did not leave their side. "See?" Ben pointed to one of the drawings he had made, copying the pattern of the plants. "Lily always said that each plant has its own voice, but some only speak when they are together with others. It's like a song that needs all the notes to make sense. Dr. Evan adjusted his glasses, examining the boy's drawings carefully. "Extraordinary," he murmured. Clarice had mentioned something similar in her last notes. She called it the symphonic code of the plants, a system where different species, when combined in specific sequences, not only enhanced their medicinal effects, but also revealed patterns that could only be understood by those who knew the ancient language. At the isolated house, Lily continued her silent resistance. Her plants had practically taken over the entire room, growing in an apparently chaotic way, but following a precise pattern that she had memorized years before when her mother took her on expeditions in Saliter Cave. Theodora, increasingly frustrated, could not understand how a 6-year-old child could be so determined. "This girl is playing with us," she complained on the phone with Adam Sterling. "She spends all day taking care of those useless plants and refuses to say anything about her mother's research." What Theodora didn't realize was that each new plant that Lily cultivated was a part of a living map, a meticulous reproduction of the interior of the cave where her mother had hidden the original. Notes of her research. The vines that climbed the walls followed exactly the pattern of the rocky fissures where the documents were hidden. The small flowers that sprouted between the boards of the floor marked specific points of reference that her mother had established. At the mansion, Magnolia made a crucial discovery while tidying up Laura's old room. Hidden at the bottom of a drawer, she found a wooden box carved with symbols similar to those Lily drew. Inside, there was a set of letters exchanged between Laura and Clarice, revealing a friendship much deeper than anyone imagined. "Dear Clarice," read one of Laura's last letters, "I know it's risky to continue our correspondence, but I can't. Abandon our mission now. The treatment you developed is the only hope for Ben and so many other children. Theodora has been asking questions about your research. Be careful. There's something about her sudden interest that worries me." Edgar read the letters with tears in his eyes, discovering a side of his deceased wife that he had never known. Laura had not only been a dedicated mother, she was part of a network protecting ancestral knowledge that Clarice was fighting to and preserve. Meanwhile, the mysterious figure who watched the isolated house had begun to move. During the night, small packages containing rare seeds began to appear mysteriously near the window of Lily's room. To any casual observer, they would seem just small paper bags carried by the wind, but the girl recognized them immediately. They were the same species that her mother cultivated in her secret garden in the cave. In his luxurious office, Adam Sterling received an unexpected visit. One of his researchers had made a disturbing discovery when analyzing plant samples collected near the house where Lily was. "Sir," began the scientist, visibly nervous, "these species, they shouldn't exist anymore. According to all botanical records, they were extinct centuries ago. Their pharmaceutical value is incalculable." Sterling felt his heart race. The plants that little Lily cultivated were not simple medicinal herbs. They were lost species, preserved only by the traditional knowledge passed down through generations of guardians like Clarice and her daughter. In the library of the mansion, Ben had a moment of clarity while examining the plant patterns for the 1,000th time. "Dad!" he exclaimed, his breathing stronger than ever, thanks to the last treatments that Lily had left. "It's not just a map, it's a score!" Dr. Evan approached quickly, intrigued. The boy began to explain, pointing to different groups of plants in the drawing. "Lily taught me that some plants are like musical notes. When you put them together the right way, they sing. And look, if we read this pattern as if it were music." The scientist took a paper and began to transcribe the pattern, transforming each group of plants into musical notes. To his astonishment, a melody began to emerge, an old lullaby that the traditional people of the region used to sing. "It's a code within another code," Oliver exclaimed, marveling. Clarice not only developed a revolutionary treatment system, she found a way to preserve an entire ancestral knowledge through music and plants. At the isolated house, Lily felt a change in the air. The wind that entered through the old ventilation brought a familiar aroma, the same perfume that her mother always emanated after long hours working with her special plants. The girl smiled, knowing that the moment she had waited so long for was near. During the night, while everyone was asleep, she began to rearrange her plants in a new pattern. Now, in the moonlight, the shadows projected by the leaves and branches formed on the walls of the room a series of symbols identical to those that her mother had drawn in the cave. A map that only the true guardians of ancestral knowledge could read. At the mansion, Edgar made a final discovery in Laura's letters. A nearly erased postscript in her last correspondence said, "Clarice, if something happens to me, look for the silver bell. Its sound will guide the way back home." That same night, in different parts of Willow Creek, 3 simultaneous events happened. At the mansion, Ben began to hum unconsciously the melody that he had discovered in the plant pattern. At the isolated house, Lily planted the last seed that would complete her living map. And in the shadows of the town, a figure with a scar on her face took from her bag a small silver bell, identical to the one mentioned in Laura's letter. A storm was forming over Willow Creek that decisive night. At the isolated house, Lily watched. The lightning through the window of her room, each flash illuminating the intricate pattern of plants she had created. Her small interior garden had been transformed into a living reproduction of the Salita cave map, each species positioned precisely to tell a story that only the true guardians could understand. Theodora, in her office downstairs, received alarming news from her contacts. Someone had begun to investigate the bank transfers related to Sterling Pharmaceuticals, and the documents that proved her alleged kinship with Lily were being questioned. "We need to act now," insisted Adam Sterling on the phone, his voice betraying a growing panic. "The investors are threatening to withdraw support from the project. If we don't get the complete formula by tomorrow, everything will be lost." At the Vanderbilt mansion, an extraordinary discovery was underway. Ben, still weak but determined, had convinced his father and Dr. Evan to try something seemingly impossible, reproduce the melody they had discovered in Lily's plant pattern. "The music is the key," explained the boy, his breathing stronger thanks to the last preparations that his friend had left. Lily always hummed when she took care of the plants. She said each one had its own song, and that together they formed a special symphony. Dr. Evan, intrigued by the boy's theory, began to organize the notes they had made about the plant pattern in a kind of improvised score. "It's fascinating," he murmured, adjusting his glasses. "Clarice always talked about the connection between music and healing in ancient traditions, but I never imagined it would be so literal." It was Magnolia who made the crucial connection. While organizing Laura's old room, she found an object that would change everything, an old score notebook with annotations in the margins. The songs were traditional lullabies from the region, but the annotations, written in Laura's handwriting, revealed something more. Their instructions, Edgar realized, examining the notebook. Laura was helping Clarice create a coding system using traditional music. Each melody corresponds to a specific combination of plants and their medicinal uses. At that moment, a particularly strong thunder shook the windows of the mansion. At the hospital, where he was doing his last tests before being discharged, Ben felt something change in the air. The familiar aroma of Lily's plants, stronger than ever, seemed to fill the entire environment. At the isolated house, Lily also perceived the change. Her messenger plants, responding to the storm, released their aromas more intensely, creating an invisible symphony of fragrances that crossed the night. The girl smiled, recognizing the signal she had waited so long for. The mysterious figure who watched the house, moved in the shadows, the silver bell in her hands reflecting the lightning. Years of patient waiting, of meticulous planning, were about to bear fruit. The scar on her face, a mark of that last night in the cave, seemed to tingle with the proximity of the decisive moment. In Edgar's office, Oliver made a shocking discovery. In the financial documents he had gathered, it wasn't just about the research, he explained, spreading papers on the table. Sterling Pharmaceuticals was trying to map all the areas where these rare plants grew naturally. They wanted not only the formula, but to control access to all the species. Dr. Evan paled as he understood the implications. If they succeeded, they could patent not only the treatment, but the plants themselves. Decades of traditional knowledge would be privatized, lost forever. At the isolated house, Theodora climbed the stairs towards Lily's room, determined to end that situation. Once and for all. Upon opening the door, however, she was paralyzed by what she saw. The room had been transformed into a true miniature forest, each plant shining strangely in the light of the lightning. Lily was in the center of the room, her small hands moving among the plants with a grace that seemed almost supernatural. Her messenger plants had grown impossibly during the storm, their flowers and leaves dancing in the breeze that entered through the old ventilation. "What did you do?" Theodora whispered, her voice trembling as she realized that there was something much bigger happening there. The girl only smiled, a smile that carried all the ancestral wisdom that her mother had transmitted to her. At that exact moment, a crystal-clear sound cut through the air, the silver bell ringing somewhere near the house. At the mansion, Ben, who had just returned from the hospital, heard the melody through his open window. Without hesitating, he began to hum the song he had discovered in the plant pattern, his childish voice mixing perfectly with the sound of the bell. Dr. Evan, who had stayed to continue the research, widened his eyes as he realized what was happening. "It's the complete code," he exclaimed. "The music of the bell, combined with the melody that Ben discovered. It's the key that Clarice created to protect her research." Edgar and Oliver ran to the garden, where the plants that Lily had left responded to the music in an extraordinary way. Their flowers opened in sequence, creating a pattern that pointed unequivocally in one direction: Salater Cave. At the isolated house, Theodora watched in astonishment as the plants in Lily's room seemed to come to life, their leaves and flowers moving in sync with the distant music of the bell. The girl remained calm, as if she had waited for this moment since the first day. It was when a new sound joined the symphony of the night, footsteps climbing the external staircase that led to the room's window. Theodora ran to prevent whatever was happening, but it was too late. The mysterious figure was already there, the silver bell still tinkling in her hand, her face marked by the scar finally visible in the lightning light. Lily felt her heart stop for a moment. Even after 2 years, even with the scar that wasn't there before, she would recognize that face anywhere. "Mom!" she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. The storm roared even stronger over Willow Creek, as if nature itself celebrated that moment of recognition. At the hospital, Ben continued to sing, his voice stronger than ever. At the mansion, Edgar and the others ran to their cars, following the path indicated by the plants. And at the isolated house, mother and daughter were reunited, while Theodora, cornered by the truth that finally came to light, realized that her carefully architected plan was about to collapse like a house of cards. The reunion between Lily and Clarice was interrupted by the screeching sound of tires skidding on the dirt road that led to the isolated house. Adam Sterling arrived with his bodyguards, alerted by a desperate message from Theodora. The storm continued to batter Willow Creek, transforming the scene into something almost surreal. "No one leaves here," Sterling bellowed, bursting up the stairs. Upon reaching the room, however, he stopped abruptly. The environment had been transformed into a true, enchanted forest, with lilies plants growing impossibly, their flowers and leaves emanating a soft glow that seemed to dance with the lightning. Clarice kept Lily close to her, the silver bell still in her hands. Her face, marked by the scar she had earned on the night of her escape from the cave, showed absolute calm. "It's over, Adam," she said, her voice firm. "The plants chose their moment." At the Vanderbilt mansion, Ben continued to sing the ancient melody, his childish voice carrying a power that no one could explain. Dr. Evan, who had stayed with the boy, watched in amazement as the plants in the garden responded to the music, their flowers opening in sequence, creating a luminous path in the rain. Edgar and Oliver, following the indications of the plants, drove down the muddy road towards the isolated house. In the back seat, Magnolia held firmly Laura's score notebook, where new annotations were mysteriously beginning to appear on the margins, as if written by an invisible hand. "It's the heat and humidity," Dr. Evan explained on the phone when Edgar called to report the phenomenon. Clarice developed a special ink using sap from certain plants. The annotations have always been there. They just needed the right conditions to reveal themselves. In the room transformed into a garden, Theodora leaned against the wall, her face a mask of disbelief. "How?" she whispered, watching Clarice. "You should be dead?" Clarice completed, a sad smile on her lips. "That's what everyone should think, isn't it? Part of your plan with Sterling to steal my research and control access to the ancestral plants." Lily, still hugged to her mother, began to finally understand all the fragments of memory that had tormented her. "It was that night in the cave," she said, her voice small but firm, "when you told me to hide behind the rocks." Clarice nodded, caressing her daughter's hair. "They followed us there. They wanted not only my notes, but also the map of the locations of all the rare plants. Plants that have existed for centuries, passed down from generation to generation, by families like ours." A particularly strong thunder shook the house, making the plants tremble. Sterling took a step forward, his arrogance momentarily shaken by the scene before him. "You don't understand, Clarice. This is bigger than you. These plants, your research, it's worth millions." "No," Clarice replied, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "You're the one who doesn't understand. This knowledge belongs to no one. It's a legacy, a gift that nature has entrusted to people who have learned to respect it through generations." At that moment, Ben, who had convinced Dr. Evan to bring him, arrived with him at the isolated house. Upon entering the room, the boy immediately resumed singing the ancient melody, louder than ever. To everyone's amazement, the plants seemed to respond, their aromas intensifying, their flowers turning in his direction. "Laura's son," Clarice murmured, recognition in her eyes. "She told me so much about you, about your condition. That's why I intensified my research." Laura had discovered the connection between the ancestral plants and the cure for his illness. The revelation hit Edgar, who had just arrived with Oliver and Magnolia, like a thunderbolt. His hands trembled as he held Laura's notebook, where the last annotations were now perfectly visible. "The cure has always been here, in our land, in our traditions. Clarice is not just developing a treatment. She is preserving a knowledge that can save countless lives." The plants in the room seemed to grow even more, their leaves and flowers creating complex patterns on the walls. Lily moved among them, with natural grace, touching certain leaves in a specific sequence. "Mom taught me," she explained, her voice soft but clear. "Each plant is like a note in a song. Together they tell stories, heal diseases, protect secrets." Theodora, seeing her plan crumble, tried one last card. "You have no proof of anything. The guardianship documents are legal. The girl stays with me." It was then that Oliver stepped forward, holding his document folder. "Actually, we have all the proof, Bank transfers, emails, call logs, everything linking you and Sterling to the attempted theft of Clarice's research, the falsification of documents, even to... He hesitated, looking at Edgar. To Laura's death, Clarice completed, her voice filled with sadness. She discovered your plan, didn't she? She was about to denounce everything. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of the rain and thunder. The plants seemed to react to the tension in the environment, their leaves trembling gently, their aromas mixing in an invisible symphony. Ben, who had approached Lily, held his friend's hand. The moment their hands touched, something extraordinary happened. All the plants in the room began to emit a soft glow, forming a pattern that resembled exactly the map that Clarice had drawn on the walls of the cave. "The children," murmured Dr. Evan, marveling. "They are the key, the next generation of guardians." At that moment, sirens began to sound in the distance, approaching the isolated house. Sterling and Theodora exchanged panicked glances, but there was nowhere to run anymore. The plants had created a living barrier around them, as if nature itself was determined to ensure that justice was done. Clarice raised the silver bell, its crystalline sound mixing with the melody that Ben still hummed softly. "It's time," she said, looking at her little Lily. "Time to show the world that some knowledge cannot be bought or sold. It needs to be preserved, protected, passed on with respect and wisdom." Lily's messenger plants, which had grown throughout the house, began to release their aromas in a final symphony, finally revealing all the secrets they had guarded for so long. The storm outside began to subside, as if its function on that extraordinary night had been fulfilled. The morning that followed that extraordinary night brought with it a transformed Willow Creek. The sun rose over the historic town, illuminating its stone streets still wet from the storm, while a sequence of events unfolded in different parts of the town. At the isolated house, now surrounded by authorities, Dr. Evan coordinated a team of specialized botanists who carefully documented each of the plants that Lily had cultivated. The girls' room had been transformed into a true living catalogue of species that were believed to be extinct for centuries. "It's incredible," he explained to Edgar, while photographing a particularly rare plant. "Each species here has a history, a specific function. Lily was not just growing plants, she was preserving an entire library of ancestral knowledge." At the hospital, Ben was undergoing a series of tests that left the doctors perplexed. His respiratory condition, which had previously seemed irreparable, showed signs of improvement that defied any conventional scientific explanation. The boy, still humming softly the ancient melody, smiled as the doctors discussed his results. "The exams show a significant regeneration of lung tissue," the specialist explained to Edgar. "It's as if something had activated a natural healing, a process that we didn't know was possible." Clarice, now installed temporarily at the Vanderbilt mansion with Lily, dedicated herself to organizing her original notes, which had been recovered from Salater Cave. Sitting in the library, with her little daughter beside her, she explained to a team of researchers the intricate system she had developed. "The treatment is not just about the plants themselves," she said, her fingers tracing delicately the patterns in her notebooks. "It's about the way they communicate with each other, how their properties are enhanced when combined in the correct sequence. The music, the ancient lullabies, are a fundamental part of the process." Lily, sitting in an armchair near the window, watched the mansion garden, where her messenger plants continued to grow, now stronger than ever. Her gaze occasionally turned to the notebook in her lap, where she drew new patterns, very similar to those that her mother had created years before. At the central police station of Willow Creek, Theodora and Adam Sterling faced the weight of their actions. The evidence gathered by Oliver was irrefutable. Documents, emails, bank transfers, all pointing to an elaborate conspiracy that went far beyond the attempted theft of Clarice's research. "We found this in Sterling's mansion vault," Oliver explained to Edgar, showing an old folder. "These are the original records of his company. They weren't just after the treatment formula. They wanted to patent the plants themselves, completely control access to this ancestral knowledge." Magnolia, who had become a key ally throughout the journey, organized a special celebration at the mansion. Under her supervision, the garden was being transformed into a space dedicated to the cultivation of medicinal plants, a project that would unite traditional knowledge with scientific research. "The children need a place to continue their work," she said, watching how Lily and Ben had already begun to plant new seedlings, their small hands working in perfect synchrony. In the late afternoon, an important meeting took place in Edgar's office. Clarice, still with the scar on her face as a reminder of her struggle, presented her proposal for the future. "We need to create an institute," she explained, her eyes shining with the same determination that her daughter had inherited. "A place where traditional knowledge is not only preserved, but studied and respected, where the next generations can learn the importance of this legacy." Edgar, looking through the window at the two children in the garden, nodded. "Laura would have loved this," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "She always believed that the cure for Ben would come from the earth, from the traditions that our modern society has almost forgotten." Dr. Evan, who participated in the meeting, added his own discovery. "The preliminary analyses of the plants that Lily cultivated show properties that we had never documented before. It's not just the treatment for Ben's condition. There's potential for cures we haven't even begun to understand." In the garden, oblivious to the adults' discussions, Lily and Ben continued their work. The girl taught her friend the secrets that her mother had passed on to her, showing how each plant had its own personality, its own music. "See how this leaf moves when you sing," she explained, demonstrating with a small lemon balm seedling. "Mum says the plants dance with our voice, that they recognize the ancient songs." Ben, breathing more freely than he had ever been able to, absorbed every word. His friendship with Lily had turned into something bigger. They were now partners, in a mission they were barely beginning to understand. As night fell, Clarice found her daughter asleep in the library, surrounded by drawings of new plant combinations. Beside her, Laura's notebook was open to a specific page, where a message now clearly visible seemed to shine in the moonlight. "For those who keep the secrets of the plants, the path is never truly lost. Each flower that opens is a word in an ancient story. Each aroma is a note in a song that should never be forgotten. The true power is not in possessing this knowledge, but in passing it on with love and respect." On the balcony of the mansion, Edgar watched the stars that began to appear in the clear sky after the storm. The silver bell, now hung delicately among the plants in the garden, tinkled softly in the night breeze, its music mixing with the whisper of the leaves. The town of Willow Creek, with its historic streets and its ancestral secrets, seemed different now, as if Lily's messenger plants had awakened something dormant in its ancient stones, a knowledge that had always been there, waiting for the right moment to bloom again. And on the walls of Salita Cave, the ancient symbols drawn by Clarice continued to tell their silent story, guarding secrets that only the true guardians, like Lily and Ben, would learn to decipher with time. 6 months had passed since the night of the storm. The Vanderbilt mansion had been transformed into an improvised research center where scientists and traditional medicine practitioners worked side by side. The garden, now expanded to occupy much of the land, housed dozens of rare species under the watchful care of Lily and Ben. On a particularly significant morning, Clarice watched her daughter through the library window. Lily, who had just turned 7, moved among the plants with a wisdom that went beyond her age, explaining their properties to a group of visiting researchers. Beside her, Ben, now completely recovered from his respiratory condition, carefully noted every detail in a notebook very similar to those that his mother Laura used to use. "It's amazing how they work together," commented Dr. Evan, who had become a constant presence at the mansion. "Ben has a natural talent for documenting knowledge, while Lily possesses this intuitive connection with the plants, just like Laura and you, Clarice." Clarice smiled, absent-mindedly touching the scar on her face, a mark she now wore with pride, a reminder of her struggle to protect not only her research, but an entire legacy of ancestral knowledge. "Laura always knew this day would come," she replied, picking up one of her friend's old notebooks. "I found another one of her hidden messages yesterday. She had foreseen all this. She knew that our children would be the key to preserving this knowledge." In the garden, Lily demonstrated to the visitors how a specific combination of plants reacted to music. Her clear voice intoned one of the ancient lullabies while touching gently on the leaves of a particularly rare species. To the astonishment of the scientists present, the plants seemed to respond, their flowers opening in a synchronized dance. "It's the symphony of the plants," Ben explained to the visitors, his breath strong and clear, evidencing the success of the treatment. "Each species has its own music, but together they create something much bigger. That's how we managed to decipher the code that saved everything." Edgar, who watched the scene from his office, received important news from Oliver. The trial of Theodora and Adam Sterling had ended, resulting in significant convictions. More importantly, all attempts to patent the medicinal plants had been legally blocked. "The evidence was irrefutable," Oliver explained, adjusting his glasses while reading the documents. "We found records of other attempts by them to appropriate traditional knowledge in different regions of the country, but this time, thanks to Lily's messenger plants, we were able to stop them." Magnolia, who had assumed not only the supervision of the mansion, but also an important role in the new institute that was being created, organized the preparations for a special event. That night, researchers and representatives of traditional communities from all over the United States would gather for the official inauguration of the Laura Vanderbilt Institute of Traditional Medicine. Laura always said that true knowledge needs to have deep roots and branches that reach the sky, she commented, arranging flowers collected from the garden in old vases. Now I understand what she meant. In the late afternoon, as the guests began to arrive, Lily and Ben made an extraordinary discovery in the garden. Among the oldest plants, a new species had begun to sprout, one that combined characteristics of several others, as if nature itself was evolving in response to the children's care. "Look, Dad," called Ben, his voice filled with excitement. "It's exactly like in Mom's last drawing." Edgar approached quickly, followed by Clarice and Dr. Evan. In Laura's notebook, which Ben always carried with him, there was indeed a detailed drawing of a plant exactly like the one that had just been born. "She knew," whispered Clarice, her eyes tearing up. Laura was not just documenting what already existed. She was predicting what could happen when ancient knowledge and new knowledge united in a harmonious way. The night of the Institute's inauguration was marked by emotional moments. Representatives from different traditional communities shared their stories and knowledge, while scientists presented the preliminary results of the research conducted. With the plants in the garden, the highlight of the celebration, however, was when Lily and Ben took to the small stage set up in the garden. Together, they presented their own discovery, a way to teach plant knowledge through music and stories, making it accessible to other children. "The plants are our teachers," explained Lily, her small but firm voice echoing through the illuminated garden. "They keep ancient stories and create new stories every day. Our mission is to learn to listen to them and share their messages." Ben, at her side, complimented, "Each plant is like a note in a larger song. Alone, it's already special, but together with the others, it creates a symphony that can heal not only diseases, but also our way of seeing the world." The silver bell, still hanging among the plants in the garden, tinkled softly in the night breeze, as if approving the children's words. Its crystalline sound mingled with the perfume of the night flowers, creating an almost magical atmosphere. Clarice, watching her daughter, felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The knowledge that her family had guarded for generations was not only safe, it was flourishing in ways that not even she could have imagined. Edgar, in turn, saw in Ben not only the physical cure he had sought so much, but a much deeper transformation. His son had found his own path as a guardian of precious knowledge, thus honoring Laura's memory in a way that no monument could equal. At the end of the night, while the guests said goodbye, Lily and Ben remained in the garden, talking softly with their plants under the starry sky of Willow Creek. The future that opened before them was like a newly planted seed, full of possibilities and promises of new discoveries. And on the walls of the mansion, the messenger plants continued to grow, their leaves dancing gently in the night breeze, guarding old and new secrets that only those with truly open hearts could understand. A year had passed since the fateful encounter in the town square of Willow Creek. The Laura Vanderbilt Institute of Traditional Medicine, now completely established on the grounds of the old mansion, had become an international reference center in the study and preservation of medicinal plants. The garden, which had begun with Lily's small seedlings, now extended over several acres, creating a true green sanctuary in the heart of the historic town. On a special spring morning, Lily, now 7 years old, walked among the flower beds with a group of children her age. Her small stature contrasted with the natural authority with which she explained the properties of each plant. Ben, completely healed and full of energy, accompanied the group, complementing his friend's explanations with the scientific notes he had learned to make. "Look at this one," Lily said, pointing to a particularly special plant. "It was born from the union of two other species that we thought couldn't grow together. But plants are like that. They surprise us when we learn to trust them." Clarice watched the scene from the balcony, her heart overflowing with pride. Beside her, Dr. Evan made enthusiastic notes on the latest research results. The treatment developed from the discoveries of Clarice and Laura had not only cured Ben, but was already showing promising results in other children with similar respiratory conditions. "It's extraordinary," commented the scientist, adjusting his glasses. "Each new analysis reveals properties we didn't imagine existed. It's as if the plants are teaching us a new language, one that combines ancestral knowledge with modern science." In the Institute's library, Edgar organized a special exhibition. The walls were covered with Laura's drawings, now completely revealed thanks to the special ink that reacted to time. Each image told a part of the story: her discoveries with Clarice, her hopes for the future, her love for her son, and her vision of a world where traditional knowledge and science walked together. Magnolia, who had become the administrative director of the Institute, supervised the preparations for an important celebration. That afternoon, representatives of traditional communities from all over the country would gather for a unique event: the first graduation of the School of Plant Guardians, a special program created by Lily and Ben to teach other children. "It's amazing how everything has transformed," she commented to Oliver, who arrived bringing the latest news about the court case. "From a story that began with so much suffering, something so beautiful was born." Oliver smiled, putting away his document folder The case against Theodora and Sterling had become an important precedent in the protection of traditional knowledge. The last attempts to appeal were denied, he informed. And best of all, they created new specific legislation to protect rare, medicinal species and the knowledge associated with them. In the garden, Lily had taken her group to a special flower bed, surrounded by a small fence decorated with colorful ribbons. There grew the new species that had emerged months before, now flourishing exuberantly. The children listened in wonder as she explained how plants could talk to each other, exchanging nutrients and information through their roots. "It's like a big family," she explained, her eyes shining with wisdom beyond her age. "Each plant has its role, its story, its music, and when we sing to them, they respond in their own way." Ben took his notebook, very similar to the ones his mother used, and showed the other children the detailed drawings he had made of the new species. "See how the leaves form a pattern that looks like a musical score," he pointed out. "It's as if nature itself were composing a new song." In the afternoon, the Institute's garden was filled with visitors for the graduation ceremony. Children from different parts of the country, all trained by Lily and Ben, presented their own research and cultivation projects. Each had learned to combine scientific knowledge with the traditions of their own communities. The most emotional moment came when Clarice took to the small stage set up among the plants. Beside her, a group of elders from different traditional communities smiled with approval. "Today, we are not only celebrating a graduation," she began. "We are celebrating the continuation of an ancestral chain of knowledge. Each child present here is a link between the past and the future." Edgar, sitting in the front row with tears in his eyes, watched his son confidently present the results of his research on music and plant growth. Ben had transformed not only into a healthy child, but into a true budding scientist, combining the natural curiosity of childhood with a deep respect for traditional knowledge. The silver bell, now an official symbol of the Institute, rang softly in the wind, its music mixing with the singing of the children who presented one of the ancient healing songs. The plants in the garden seemed to respond, their flowers opening, in a synchronized dance that left the visitors in awe. At the end of the ceremony, Lily and Ben led everyone to a special part of the garden where a bronze plaque had been installed. On it, the names of Laura and Clarice were engraved along with a message: "For those who know how to listen, the plants never stop singing. For those who know how to see, each flower tells a story. For those who know how to love, knowledge is a seed that never stops growing." When night fell over Willow Creek, the Institute's garden continued to be alive, with the joyful voices of the children and their families. Lily and Ben, sitting in their favorite place among the messenger plants, shared their dreams for the future. "You know what I like most?" said Lily, caressing a leaf that danced in the night breeze. "It's that now the plants have more friends to talk to. They're not alone anymore." Ben smiled, his notebook open in his lap, showing new drawings of species not yet catalogued. "And we're not alone anymore either," he replied. "We're all part of the same story now." Clarice, watching the children from afar, felt a deep peace in her heart. The knowledge that her family had guarded for generations was not only safe, it was flourishing in ways that not even she could have imagined. The messenger plants of her little Lily had taken root far beyond the garden, reaching hearts and minds across the country. And so, under the starry sky of Willow Creek, while the silver bell played its soft music in the wind, a new generation of guardians began its journey. The legacy of Laura and Clarice lived not only in the plants that grew in the garden, but in the smiles of the children who had learned to hear their stories, in their voices that now sang the ancient healing songs, and in the promise of a future where science and tradition danced together like flowers in an endless garden.